This week on BSD Now, we've got Netflix and FreeBSD news to discuss, which is always a crowd pleaser. That plus EuroBSDCon is just around the corner. Stick around for your place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 159, Net Scaling Privacy, Flix Style, recorded September 14th, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
That was like the longest title.
I think our editor's going to kill you when he has to try to make that fit on the little frame on the screen.
Sorry. I had to come up with something, but It works. So I'll try to be shorter for next week. But anyway, we're glad to have you guys with us this week. I know we're just about a week out from EuroBSDCon here. So, Alan, you all packed, ready to go? No? Okay.
I don't leave until Tuesday. It's only Wednesday. I have almost a week.
You got time. Okay.
I'll pack up.
So you got a whole weekend to get yourself ready.
It's like I'll do laundry on the weekend, and then I'll have clothes to pack.
There you go. Well, I wish you all the luck. I'm not going to make it out this year, but I know some of our listeners will. So, of course, you'll have to stop by and say hi to Alan. Please. If you haven't bought a copy of his book, maybe do that ahead of time, and he can sign it.
Yes, I don't have room in my luggage to bring any with me. Sorry.
Yes. So bring your own books if you want to get them signed. So that would be cool. But anyway, we'll of course look forward to hearing when you get back how that went and how the conference was. And I'm sure, EuroBSD is always fun, so I'm sure it'll be good. But hey, we should hop right into the headlines here. We got lots of news to get to this week. So first up, we have protecting Netflix viewing privacy at scale with FreeBSD. You see how I got that title now? Okay. Anyway. Go ahead and tell us about what's going on over at Netflix.
So this blog post is from Netflix, and it tells the story of how Netflix developed in-kernel TLS to speed up delivery of video over HTTPS. So they say, since the beginning, their OpenConnect program, which is where they build these FreeBSD boxes full of hard drives and ship them out to ISPs and internet exchanges in order to offload some of the traffic, right? So if your ISP has one of these boxes, when you're watching Netflix, you don't have to actually use up your ISP's internet connection. It's coming from inside their LAN, basically. And you also get better speed watching Netflix because you're pulling videos over the LAN, basically, instead of the internet.
Sure.
So the goal for them has always been about efficiency, and they say they've significantly increased the efficiency of their OpenConnect appliances. Back in 2012, when I first saw a Netflix appliance in person at MeetBSD 2012, they were pushing 8 gigabits per second out of each box. And we were all...
Which seems so big at the time.
We were all in awe of that number. It was like, wow, that's a lot.
That's incredible.
But now, in 2016, they pushed 90 gigabits from a single server.
Which, again, sounds so big, and then in 5 years, we'll have an update where it's like, we just pushed 400 gigabits from our box. We're like, amazing.
They say, we continue in this effort on the software side by optimizing every aspect of the system software and optimizing for their unique use case. In particular, focusing on the open source FreeBSD operating system and the Nginx web server. And that's what they run on the OpenConnect appliances.
Sure.
They say, in the modern internet world, we have focused not only on efficiency, but also security. There are many state-of-the-art security mechanisms in place at Netflix, including using TLS, or transport level security. It's transport layer security, isn't it? Anyway, encryption on customer information, search queries, and other confidential data. However, we have always relied on the pre-encrypted digital rights management stuff to secure the video streams. Right? That way, the users can't record the video. But over the past year, we've begun to use secure HTTP, or HTTP over TLS, or HTTPS, to encrypt the transport of the video content as well. This helps protect member privacy, particularly when the network is insecure, ensuring that our members are safe from eavesdropping by anyone who might want to record their viewing habits. So the goal of this is to ensure that your government, your ISP, or your Wi-Fi sniffing neighbor can't tell which shows you like on Netflix.
Okay.
So the Netflix OpenConnect network serves over 125 million hours of content per day. That's a lot of wasted time.
It's right.
Yeah.
Think of all the lost productivity as a human species that could be reclaimed if we all
We just broke Netflix. Yeah. That's it. But
Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to
Yes.
knock it because I'm one of
yeah,
those
exactly.
people.
If I could unwind and watch some Netflix, then. But they say, given our scale, the added overhead of TLS encryption on the video stream would potentially, greatly reduce the efficiency of their global infrastructure, right? If they had to if they had to encrypt that 90 gigabits a second of traffic on the CPU, they would very quickly not be able to do 90 gigabits anymore.
Yeah, they run out of CPU.
Yeah. And then they would need a lot more appliances, and they don't really want to have to do that. So they say we evaluated available and applicable ciphers and modes, and decided to primarily use the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES, cipher in the Galos counter mode, or GCM, which became available starting in TLS 1.2. We chose AES GCM over the regular AES CBC method because CBC has a higher computational cost. In particular, the AES GCM cipher encrypts and authenticates the message simultaneously. So when you encrypt something with AES GCM, not only are you encrypting it, but you also generate an HMAC of it, basically. So you can verify that the data wasn't modified as well. With AES CBC, that's a separate step. So after you encrypt all the data, you have to read all the data again and run it through the HMAC to come up with the signature to make sure that it wasn't modified. So you go from 2 steps to 1 step, and so that's obviously better.
Sure.
Although they still use CBC as a fallback if the client cannot support AES GCM. Although, most people are probably watching a modern version of Chrome or Firefox, and so that's taken care of there.
Well, I was just thinking about that, though. Think about all the old devices.
Yeah, in particular, it's like the Rokus
and Rokus, right? All these little standalone appliances, game consoles, tablets that maybe don't.
Yeah, so that's why they have to offer the backup mode. Although, in particular, most of those devices aren't going to be pulling down the highest HD stream, and so it's less impact on them that way.
True.
But yes, they're hoping more and more things will support TLS 1.2. They say, all revisions of our Open Connect appliance also have Intel CPUs that support AES-NI, the extra extension to the x86 instruction set that improves the encryption and decryption performance. They say, we needed to determine the best implementation of AES GCM that works with AES-NI so that we could get the best performance. So they investigated OpenSSL, alternatives like Boring SSL and LibreSSL, and also the Intel Intelligent Storage Acceleration Library, or ISAL. Netflix and Nginx had previously worked together to improve their HTTP client request and response times by the use of the send file system call, which basically performs zero copy data flow from the storage, like the hard drive, to the network socket. So normally, without this extra stuff, what you'd end up doing is, the request comes into the web server. The web server figures out which file you want and asks the kernel to read the file, and then it gets read into Nginx, which then copy that data to a socket and say, hey, kernel, please send this out the network card. With send file, Nginx is just like, hey, kernel, could you send this file to this socket? And the kernel does it all and doesn't actually have to copy the data. It's as it reads it in from the hard drive, it just passes that existing buffer directly out to the network card instead of having to make a copy of it or copy it out to user land and then back and so on. Yes. So that keeping the data in the kernel memory address space and relieves a lot of burden on the CPU. The Netflix team specifically added the ability to make the send file call asynchronous. So instead of saying, hey, kernel, send this file, and you end up sitting there waiting until it's done, you just say, hey, kernel, send this file, and the kernel calls you later and says, hey, I'm done.
Yeah.
And that allows more work to happen at once.
Did that stuff get upstreamed,
Yes.
do you know? Okay, cool.
The Netflix team specifically, right, already said that. So that allows more simultaneous connections because they don't need as many threads to handle waiting for those to complete. However, TLS functionality, which requires the data to be passed to the application layer so it can be encrypted, completely invalidates that whole send file approach, right? Because now you have to read the file, pull it back into Nginx to push it into SSL to encrypt it to then push it back in the kernel. So to retain the benefits of the SemFile model while adding TLS functionality, we designed a hybrid TLS scheme whereby session management stays in the application space, right? Nginx and OpenSSL still do the regular thing to negotiate your encryption. But the bulk encryption of the data is actually done via SendFile in the kernel. So this extends SendFile support to include bulk encryption. So basically, Nginx sets up the key for the session and says, hey, kernel, send this file, but first encrypt it with this key. And then the user gets it, and it doesn't have to go out to user space.
It seems like they're just moving a lot of functionality into the kernel now and providing the necessary hooks to do that.
Yeah, so it basically keeps the web server nice and light by having it do as little work as possible and passing it off as much as we can. Yep. Sorry. And then so we tested the boring SSL and ISA-L ASGCM implementations with their SemFile improvements against a baseline of OpenSSL with no SemFile changes under typical Netflix traffic conditions on 3 different OCA hardware types. So they have an older one, which is all hard drives, another one, which is hard drives with some SSDs, and then they have an all SSD one. So they tried all 3 of those, and they found that our changes in both boring SSL and the ISA-L test situations significantly increased both CPU utilization and bandwidth over the baseline, offering a performance increase of up to 30%, depending on which OCA hardware version. You know, they have some older machine, but yeah, the newer machines can get up to 30% more performance by using the optimized version of like boring SSL as opposed to just regular OpenSSL without the send file change. They ended up choosing the Intel ISA-L Cipher implementation because it had slightly better results than Google's boring SSL. With these improvements in place, we continue to the process of adding TLS to our video streams for clients that support it without suffering from prohibitive performance hits.
So they do obviously take a little performance hit. I'm curious to know what the numbers are on that. Like without the SSL, we get this, and with we get this even with their improvements. You know?
It's quite interesting, and they just give a talk about this at the Intel Developer Forum, or will this month? I'm not sure if it's. I think it hadn't happened yet when this was posted, but it's a couple of weeks old, so it's happened by now. Anyway, if you'd like to know more about how this actually works, at the bottom of the page, they link to the papers from EuroBSDCon 2015 and 2016. So 2015 is the original version, and then 2016 they have the improvements they made to it after they actually got, using it more. So yeah, that one's quite interesting.
Okay. We'll look forward. We always enjoy hearing updates from Netflix. They do some really cool stuff. They hack FreeBSD in neat ways to improve our viewing. Okay. So, of course, we get some OpenBSD news to talk about now, which, of course, you need OpenBSD on more platforms. So what's the new one they just added?
Yes. So this is the HP Stream 7, which is one of these little tablets that looks like a little Android tablet, but it actually has a real Intel Atom CPU in it. So you don't have to, port it to a new platform. So yes, Ted goes on to say, recent events have rocked the mobile computing world to its core. OpenBSD retired the Zaris port, which is some really old mobile platform, leaving users leaving users in desperate need of a new device. And not long after that, Microsoft released the anniversary update of Windows 10, but with free space requirements such that it's nearly impossible to install on a cheap 32 gigabyte eMMC equipped device. Like my Intel Compute Stick or the HP Stream series, leaving users searching for a new lightweight operating system. With necessity as both mother and father, the scene is set for a truly epic pairing, OpenBSD on the HP Stream 7.
There you go.
So yeah, the HP Stream line is a series of budget computers in a couple of form factors. The Stream 11 is your fairly typical netbook type mini laptop. However, the Stream 7 and 8 are tablets. They look like cheap Android devices, but inside they're real boys, or PCs, with Intel Atom CPUs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Might have to get my hands. I'm looking at the picture over here. I need to look at one of those.
So to install OpenBSD on such a device, you need a few different parts. Obviously, you need the tablet, and this thing doesn't have very many ports on it. So you also need to get it only has this one micro USB port. So you need one of these
USB
OTG or on-the-go cables that will basically turn that into a Type A port so that you can actually plug stuff into it. That only gives you one, so you're going to need a mini hub, and then you're going to need a USB stick and a keyboard and a network adapter.
Of course.
So once you're done, this thing's going to have a lot of things hanging off of it for a couple of minutes here.
Well, ideally, if you set it up right, you wouldn't need
you wouldn't need them after, but to do the install, you're going to need something to boot off of, a keyboard to type onto, a network to install some packages, and so on.
This is just like working on a car. You need your toolkit. Exactly. Get your toolkit out. We're going to do some surgery here.
So first, we need to prep the machine to boot from USB. Actually, before doing that, make sure it has a full charge because it's going to have to be running off battery while you're doing this. So you want to plug everything in. So that's the flash drive, the keyboard, the network into the hub into the OTG cable, the cable into the port on the top of the stream. And then when you turn on the machine, if you hold down the volume button, this launches a mini menu from which you can enter the BIOS. There's a little on-screen keyboard in the corner, so this can be done without a keyboard, but, ick. So, real keyboard is better. We need to change two of the settings in the boot section. First, you want to turn off secure boot, and second, you want to switch it to boot off USB if it's present. So then save and exit. The first reboot actually reveals a confirmation screen checking that you really want to disable secure boot, so somebody couldn't have tricked you into it. So it will print a PIN number on the screen, and you have to key in that PIN number in order to actually disable secure boot. Once you've done that, it'll boot off USB and boot up the OpenBSD installer that you've put on the USB stick. And so then it goes through the install and gets it working, and on first boot, it immediately panics. So then Ted,
that's promising.
Ted works through a number of kernel panics and other issues, and he basically ends up having to make a modified kernel on his computer, copy it to the USB stick, boot off the installer USB, then copy the file into the installed system, and then reboot back in without the USB. But anyway, eventually he gets it to actually boot up enough, but the screen doesn't work. As soon as the Intel DRM driver pops up, the screen goes blank. Luckily, SSH is working at this point, so we can SSH in and copy files around that way instead of having to sneaker net them with the USB stick. So eventually he gets the Intel DRM stuff disabled and gets X installed. He says, of course, there's no X at this point, and definitely no touchscreen, and no internal networking, and no battery monitoring. However, by keeping our USB hub attached, we can drive the console and access the network, at least until the battery is depleted, even if we have no way of knowing how long it will be since we've disabled all the ACPI devices, which also means no suspend or resume. But eventually, with some xorg.conf hacking, he did get X started, as you can see in the picture here. He's actually running the little GLX Gears demo on his tablet. So if he manages to get the touchscreen going, he might actually have something.
Could be a neat little device. I need to see if somebody's done this on FreeBSD now. I need to play with that. Although I imagine you're not going to run ZFS on it, so interest quickly fading. Sorry, that's the benchmark by which I hold all things. Okay. All right. Well, very cool, though. That's neat to see. Again, take a look at it. The pictures there is neat. And if you have one of these devices, I mean, he's gotten you mostly there, so maybe you can finish it up. Yep. Okay, well, let's move on here. So we have some Dragonfly BSD news. It looks like Dragonfly BSD is now one of the number of projects which is starting to switch over to LibreSSL, which is pretty cool. We have a list of some commits here, including a link over on Undeadly. But this actually may sound vaguely familiar, Alan, but Dragonfly is now creating a private LibreSSL library, which is only linked against the base system binary. So, again, something you had proposed doing for FreeBSD.
Yeah, it works for them because they don't have Kerberos and so
Yes. So, but where they've kind of skewed a little bit here is they're still actually building OpenSSL. So OpenSSL is still built, and that's primarily done so that various dports and third-party apps can continue to function as before. Makes sense, right? Looks like they've already added a no OpenSSL option, but it really doesn't do much yet. It still actually builds SSL, installs the libraries and headers. So definitely some ongoing work there. Although there was a second commit here. which was the same thing. But yeah, so it's neat to see they're starting to take the plunge here. So I guess Open and Dragonfly have switched over. We've switched over for TrueOS. When is FreeBSD? Come on, we're going to do it.
Well, looks the ports on FreeBSD are getting to the point where they're always going to use OpenSSL from ports, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's obviously the first step. Once that's all, everybody's using that, it's much easier to plunk it out of base.
Much less pain to switch over, but still, that's really cool to see. I'm excited for that. I wish the LibreSSL project all the luck and the best in the world, and hopefully it continues to see more adoption like this. I wonder if we have a list of which Linux distros have switched over to, if any. That would be interesting to hear. Maybe somebody in the Linux community can tell me that. Anyway, good stuff. Okay, so we're going to do our first sponsor this week before we get to some of your next news stories. We're going to be starting with DigitalOcean. So the website for that, digitalocean.com, where you want to go and get signed up. If you don't have an account, great. You can make one. That's a freebie. It's easy to do. But when you make your account afterwards, don't forget to use the coupon code FreeBSDNow. That's how they know you heard about it, here on Jupiter Broadcasting or BSDNow specifically. Mm-hmm. And also you get your $10 credit, which is good for running basically 2 months of their lowest NVM or maybe a month of the next level one, etc., depending on what your needs are. But of course, what's really cool is when they first came on board as a sponsor, it was right, I think, around the time they launched the FreeBSD support. So they had FreeBSD natively in the cloud, which is pretty slick, and they've continued doing that. Now you can even get FreeBSD with ZFS pre-installed. We've talked about it, a whole bunch on the show in the past, but you can do things like OpenBSD, Net, Dragon, etc. So if you're willing to mess around with it a little bit, they give you pretty much all the tools. You have access to the box, just like it would be something local.
Yep. Now that they have support for ZFS on FreeBSD with pre-built images, they've now just launched their new high memory droplets. So if you need a droplet with 32, 64, or 128 gigabytes of RAM in order to power your big ZFS, you can do that now. Combined with their block storage, where you can rent storage by the gigabyte in increments from 1 gigabyte to 16 terabytes, you can now build a giant storage droplet.
Okay. Oh, that's very cool. Very cool to see indeed.
The big thing is they come with quite a bit of transfer included. If you're getting the 32 gigs of RAM one, that includes 7 terabytes of upload.
That's amazing, man. How do they give this away for so cheap? But anyway, they do it, not our problem, right? But anyway, they have data centers all over the world, of course. So find a location nearest to you if you're doing something where you want it close to you. Maybe you're sending data far away to keep it backed up or whatever. Maybe you need redundancy somewhere else. So, of course, they can do that as well. Take a look today. Get in touch with them. And, of course, if you talk to anybody over at DigitalOcean, tell them you heard about it here on BSD Now. Okay, Alan, so we got some hackathon reports to get to, it looks like, and quite a few of them. So OpenBSD, of course, recently did a hackathon. So tell us, I guess, which one do you want to start with? Are we going to go through all these, or do you want to
at least pick a couple here? But the first one here is from Anton Jacuto, who was working on binary patches system for OpenBSD. He says, the one thing I wanted to work on, or rather talk about during the week, was having a way to provide binary updates for both the base system and packages to ease maintenance of OpenBSD fleets. While it's perfectly possible to build your own stable releases and packages, it's a lot of work that could be done centrally instead of having each and every user come up with their own solution. Plus, this means that we can get official signed updates. He said, to be honest, I was expecting some reluctance since it would mean a change to our workflow, but Theo was very open to the idea as long as it's done properly and up to the OpenBSD standards. Okay. And so they say the first bits are in, and this is how it's going to work eventually. Fetch tarballs containing the updated binaries, kernel, and files. Verify them with Signify. Create a rollback tarball containing the installed files that are about to be replaced. Extract the syspatch tarball to a temporary location. Use the install commands to safely extract the files and put them in place with the right permissions. And if anything goes wrong or if the patch introduces a regression, roll back using the tarball we created before, and your system's back to normal.
That sounds neat.
Yeah. And there's some more detail about that if you're interested. And then we have Matthew Herb worked with XenoDM, which is some X-related stuff. What else we have? Vincent Gross worked on IKD, ARMv7, and iNet and iNet 6. Florian worked on the networking Acme client, which is the
the new Acme client,
LibreSS or not Let's Encrypt thing, and a bunch of other stuff. Jasper worked on DDB, the debugger, and other stuff. Christian worked on getText, the real-time clock, and removing some cruft from the kernel. Brent Cook worked on Chromebooks, crypto, and a bunch of other stuff. Ted Unanks worked on Duaz, Signify, and removing more code, because that's everybody's favorite thing to do.
Right.
Mark SP.
I like deleting stuff. I would do that.
Mark SP worked on the new package signing evolution, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Adam worked on ports, the wireless drivers, and a bunch of more. And Mike Larkin worked on VMM and VMD. They're kind of...
I wonder how that's coming along. Maybe I think they did a talk at last year's Tokyo EuroBSDCon.
Yeah,
maybe they'll give us an update at the Beehive
Yeah,
Con
I
there.
missed that because I was doing the dtrace tutorial.
That's right. No, it was good. It sounded like they still had a lot of stuff to do. So I'd be curious to hear maybe a year later if they come back and give us an update on where VMM's at.
Yeah. So it says here he worked on VMM and VMD, and he's been sitting on a diff waiting for the implementation of the real interrupt controller. This is so that we have a real hard clock interrupt and avoid the previous clock hack that made VMD spin 100% CPU usage. He says, once I had that done, I cleaned up and refactored some of the VMD code, separating out each device into its own module/file. This made it easier for Stefan to add asynchronous interrupt handling via libevent later in the week. He next fixed up some MSR or model-specific registers bitmap. This is a giant mask that tells the processor which MSRs to allow the guest VM directly to access. Some are safe and some aren't, and some don't make sense at all for a VM, so this controls who has access. This bitmap is now locked down to just the minimal set of MSRs needed for well-behaved guest VMs, and those that aren't well-behaved will think they're accessing off-limit MSRs, but we just discard the writes and return 0 on read. He also removed some CPU ID feature bits exposed to guest VMs so that the guest VM doesn't think that the VM can handle stuff it doesn't. Removing things that aren't implemented or don't make sense for a guest, like the various thermal management or speed step bits, because you really don't want your VM running PowerD.
Yeah, not so much.
He said he wrapped up the week by dusting off a diff to provide a real BIOS inside the guest VM that will make it easier to boot other types of guests, but not having to go through the ELF bootloader. This last bit did not get completed, and that's what he's working on now. So that'll be really interesting to have a BIOS like that.
You know what we should get? Mike, you need to come on the show and tell us about it. That sounds like a great interview. Any of you OpenBSD guys are out there, if Mike doesn't personally listen, nag him. Tell him to come on the show. We'll set it up.
More than that, start twisting his arm.
Yeah, there you go. Just disable his commit access. Like, oh, wait, you haven't done an interview yet. Oh, sorry. Anyway, no, that's good stuff. We'll look forward to hearing about more of that. Okay, heading into the news roundup now, folks. So first up, we have some OpenBSD information. Specifically, maybe you're one of those people who has a Chromebook Pixel. So if you're looking for a laptop to make your OpenBSD a road warrior, if so, we have a great blog tutorial about getting OpenBSD set up on the Pixel with encrypted soft RAID. So author Joshua Stein gives us a very, very verbose look at how to install and just kind of dial in the laptop perfectly. But for those of you, first of all, who are wondering about the hardware on the Pixel, because I myself didn't know what was in it, it looks like it has an Intel Core i7 processor, Broadwell at 2.4 gigahertz, 16 gigs of memory, a 256 by 1700 400 nit IPS screen, not bad, and Intel 802.11 AC wireless. It has a Kingston 64 gig flash chip, which about 54 gigabytes can be used by OpenBSD when you're dual booting, with 1 gigabyte left for the Chrome OS partition. So all things considered, I guess that's the weakest spot of it. I don't know if that's upgradable, if you can take that chip out or expand that. It sounds like it's on the board. But either way, it's enough, I think, to get going here. But of course, due to this Chromebook being set up with CBIOS, and because it's a Chromebook, there's some manual key press trickery that's going to be required for you initially to get the OpenBSD installer up and running, which Joshua goes ahead and tells us how to do. But from here, you're going to want to pay special close attention to doing disk partitioning. In particular, Joshua is going to be nice and show us how to shrink the existing encrypted /home that Chrome OS uses, which does keep the dual boot intact. And this may be important if you ever plan on updating the device. So keep that in mind fine before you just willy-nilly blow it away. But from here, he moves back to a little bit more of a traditional setup, but with, of course, the added bonus of doing a soft RAID setup that's encrypted. But wait, the fun isn't over yet. Now you've done all this work. Say you want to make OpenBSD the default boot on the system. Not as trivial as you'd think, because that requires actually cracking the lid on the device and removing a special pink write protect screw, which was very fascinating to see him do that. And of course, if you want to remove the default splash screen image, Joshua has you covered there as well, although there's going to be a few flash ROM magic commands that are required as well, which thankfully he's detailed quite well for us. But at this point, you're pretty much up and running with OpenBSD on the device. He does include a lot of final details on how to kind of tweak and fine-tune specific bits of the hardware, and then he has a compatibility list at the end of all the things that work. Surprisingly, just about everything works minus audio and Bluetooth. So Bluetooth I could live without. The audio is probably a little bit more of a bummer, but everything else looks like it just kind of goes. But quite a verbose look at how to set that up. Did you see some of the pictures of that?
Yeah, I was just showing a couple of them.
Yeah, that's pretty slick. I like that. So might need to get a hold of one of those. Do you know what those run?
No, but being Broadwell with 16 gigs of RAM, that probably won't be that cheap. But it looks like they managed to trim the price down by not having to put in a hard drive and skipping on a couple other things, including not having to have a Windows license or anything because it's Chrome OS.
Yeah. But he also mentions things like suspend, resume work, and touchpad and touchscreen work. So that's pretty cool that all that stuff kind of just works. Again, the audio not being there, kind of a bummer, but maybe that gets added at some point. Either way, though, I think that's a great alternative. Again, if somebody's looking for a Chromebook or a neat project that involves cracking open the lid too, this is a pretty neat one. Okay, well, let's move on to the next one here.
We got a blog post from Ted Unix, and he's talking about DoAs. So he says,
DoAs Mastery specifically. Yes. Has anybody told Michael W. Lucas about this?
There's a thank you to Michael for the name at the end of the blog post. But yes, Michael is you foiled me.
Right? But Ted Unix, of course, our buddy for the show here, has written up a great mastery guide of the DoAs command, which may come in handy if you're one of the uninitiated in the DoAs land, which honestly, I got to admit, I haven't had a chance to play with it too much yet. I need to. I see it's in the ports tree. I need a package install it and start messing around with it. Maybe it's something better we can ship with TrueOS. I don't know. I'll look at it. It's on my list, pending free time.
But of course, he starts off. He says, it's been a year since he introduced DoAs, and so it's clearly time to write a book, or maybe just a pamphlet.
There you go.
So he says, Unix systems have two classes of users, the super user and regular users. The super user is super, and everybody else is not. This concentration of power keeps things simple, but it also means often too much power is granted. Usually, we only need super user power to perform one specific task. We would rather not have that power all the time. Think of the responsibility that would entail.
I can't handle that. It's too much
Like
pressure.
the sudo command, DoAs allows for subdivision of super user privileges, granting them only for specific tasks. But in particular, when you look at the default configuration of DoAs, you understand the difference.
Sure.
So by default, doas.conf is empty. It's just
no privileges.
just blank file, and that empty config does nothing. What it basically it's a default deny state, just like a firewall. And so if you run DoAs, it's like, sorry, DoAs is not enabled. So even root doesn't have permission to use DoAs at this point. So yeah, there's no configuration. All DoAs will exit, printing an error message saying that it's not currently enabled. So then you can add a simple rule like permit wheel. And now anybody in the wheel group will be able to use DoAs, but they'll be prompted for their password. So what if you want to use
rather PF-like?
And so if you want to be able to run DoAs as root, and he explains why you might want to do that, because you've set up your script to use DoAs to do it, and then you happen to already be root and you're running it. So you can see how you set up so root doesn't require to enter the root password in order to run things since they're already root or whatever. But as you see, we have these rules: permit wheel, and then permit no pass, keep environment root. And the order in particular is important there because, like PF, this config file is last match, not first match. So you put your less specific rules first and get more and more specific as you go down the file. And so if these rules weren't in this order, then because root is part of the wheel group, or is it? Anyway, it might match that one first and then end up asking for a password, even though you have a more specific rule that says, anybody in root can do whatever, or anybody in the wheel group can do what they want. But if they're root, then they don't need a password. And then it talks about doing things like the persist keyword, which means that Duaz will only ask you the password once every 5 minutes instead of once every 5 seconds, which can get annoying. And then it shows, how you can restrict. So while wheel can persist and run any command they want, if they want to reboot, they have to re-enter the password or whatever, and so on and so on. And it just shows how it works in basic steps, including slightly more complicated versions. But in the end, it does look a lot easier to write the configs than sudo.
Sure. Yeah, I might need, like I said, I may need to consider us switching to that. It just looks so much less complicated. And
yeah, but how many people's finger memory, or if they're following a tutorial, it's going to be sudo.
That is true. Maybe we need to go dual stack for a while. Have both. Make sudo a shell script that's like, you actually meant do it. No, I won't do that. Sorry, I don't hate you guys that much.
Do it. So yeah, he's got some thank yous at the end for various people that helped out, including Vadim Zukov, Todd Miller, Damian Miller, Martin Van Duren, Theodor Rat, Henning Brouwer, but also he says he owes Michael Lucas for stealing his catchy title from the Sudo Mastery book. So if you do use sudo, check out Michael's book, Sudo Mastery, to michaelwlucas.com.
I'm sure a lot of the concepts still transfer over, just be implemented differently, and knowing that Duaz has a smaller subset of things it does.
Yes, and just looking at sudo mastery, you're just like, I didn't realize I could do that.
Yeah,
all kinds of fancy.
A lot of craziness involved.
Yep.
Okay, well, it's time for our second sponsor this week, folks, which, of course, is going to be IX Systems. So the website for that, of course, ixsystems.com/BSDNow, where you can go and get in touch with those good folks over there and let them build the next system you need for your data center, for your home office, your office, pretty much anything in between. So little FreeNAS Mini under your desk, they got it. Big IX rack, which is pretty much like a cloud in a rack. Set up any way you want. They can do that too. And of course, they're TrueNAS storage enterprise products as well. They, of course, have everything built, the latest and greatest Intel processors. They can get special ones if you need a particular revision of a particular model. Like they can try and find that for you and build that into your next system.
That's the big thing is because they custom build every server, it's exactly what you need. So I had the thing, it's like, so I need more video transcoders, but this time we want to use giant NVIDIA video cards. But we prefer to still only take one U of space, right? And so then it comes down to, well, with the current ones, we had to swap out the SATA cables to 90-degree cables. Otherwise, they poke up into the fan on the GPU. So what we really like is like a narrower motherboard where the card doesn't overhang the motherboard, right? And it's like, and we need them to have 10 gigabit network cards, and yeah.
So you realize this is the conversation you just wouldn't even have elsewhere, right? Like it wouldn't even get.
They'd be like, we don't have one of those.
No. We only sell this model. That's all we have. The fact you're even talking to them saying, okay, I need to change things inside the chassis and move the motherboard, smaller motherboard, put a card. That's just the kind of service you just don't get elsewhere.
So I basically tell them what I need, and they're like, all right, let us go research that. And the next day they come back. It was like, okay, so we found a motherboard that'll work, and we found a way to actually get 2 expansion cards into a 1U chassis. Basically, one card goes this way and one card goes this way. And all the good stuff. And it's going to get built.
Of course, we also have to mention they have up on their blog a link. It looks like IX Systems will be hosting MeetBSD California 2016. This year, it's being held at UC Berkeley, which I don't know. Has that ever happened before?
Nope, it's the first time.
Big deal.
BSD's coming home.
So we're going to the birthplace of BSD to do MeetBSD. So if you have any opportunity at all to get out to this, go ahead and check out the link we have in the show notes here. Of course, go to MeetBSD and get signed up. I know that you need to start registering here soon so they can start doing a head count and figuring out logistics and whatnot. But that's, I think, November 10th and 11th with a one-day dev summit on the
day before.
No, the dev summit's on the 10th.
Yeah, and the conference is 11th.
12th is the conference. Yep. Yes.
So they have a great quote here from Kirk McCusick, who is one of the people originally at Berkeley who was doing the work on BSD. And he says, I'm thrilled to have the BSD conference return to the campus at which it started. I look forward to catching up on all the latest work going on in the BSD systems, especially look forward to the party at the historic Hillside Club on the Friday evening.
Fantastic. It's going to be a great year. So I know I'm going to be there. Alan's going to be there. So this is your opportunity to meet us both in the same place.
Yep.
So come on out. Come say hi. We would love to meet you. Okay, well, let's move into our next story here. It looks like the FreeBSD Foundation's been welcoming some new board members on board. So it looks like they added 2 new members. So who did they start with?
They started with Kylie Lang, who's actually the program manager at Microsoft for the FreeBSD-related projects.
Okay.
So yeah, she's joining the board in order to represent FreeBSD at conferences and businesses in China. She says, I live in China. There I can act as a bridge between Chinese companies and the FreeBSD community to help drive FreeBSD adoption. Through my leadership role in the FreeBSD Foundation, I hope to help promote FreeBSD in China and also represent the foundation at conferences and events in my region.
Oh, that's great.
In her day job, Kylie leads the team that ensures FreeBSD runs well on Hyper-V and Microsoft's Azure cloud, including providing commercial support for customers who run FreeBSD or FreeBSD-based appliances on the Azure cloud. She says, I joined Microsoft and started to lead the project called FreeBSD Integration Services to get FreeBSD running well on Hyper-V and Azure. To promote our work and to understand the FreeBSD ecosystems, I started participating in FreeBSD events where I was inspired by the technical community. And you can go on, and if you follow the link, you can read her onboarding interview where she answers a lot of interesting questions. And then the second new member of the FreeBSD Foundation is Philip Papes, who's actually one of the organizers of EuroBSDCon this year.
He's been around forever.
Organizing events is kind of his thing. He organized FOSDEM for many years. But yeah, so he started with FreeBSD in early 2000s and got his commit bit in 2004 when he got the ACPI stuff working on his laptop so that it would suspend and pursue.
Nice.
He says, the patches I submitted to make ACPI and input devices work on my laptop led to a source commit bit in 2004. He says, while I haven't worked on ACPI or input devices since, I've been contributing to different areas of the kernels and taking up maintainership of some ports I care about, and ended up getting a ports commit at some point as well. So Philip will continue to help run things like EuroBSDCon and spread the word about FreeBSD in India and Africa in particular. He says,
nice.
Primarily, I think I can be useful, and I attend and organize a number of conferences around the world every year, particularly in regions that have mostly a stealthy FreeBSD community. While I clearly don't have to be on the FreeBSD Foundation to advocate for FreeBSD, joining as a director will provide an additional asset when working in areas of the world where organizational affiliations are meaningful. Philip's also done quite a bit of work on developing things like network drivers. I know the solar flare cards that I bought off eBay recently. I read the man page for them, and it's like driver written by Philip Papes.
There you go.
And basically, he has a lot of experience in working with hardware and appliance vendors and working for them and so on. So he says, despite intending to eventually contribute their code to the FreeBSD project as open source, many hardware vendors still find it very difficult to engage directly with the FreeBSD development community. The foundation helps bridge that gap and helps facilitate collaboration between commercial vendors and the FreeBSD community. So I think his insight of actually having worked with a bunch of these vendors before will make him a very big asset to the FreeBSD Foundation for...
He knows the challenges those companies face.
Making sure that more and more of those companies make their official drivers the open source one and have all the latest stuff, and make sure that they're actually developing their driver in head, not 9.3.
Sure.
And so on. But he says, I hope to make FreeBSD more visible in regions of the world where it is historically underrepresented. I expect I will be attending even more conferences and getting myself invited to even more organizations.
Sounds like trouble to me.
Exactly. That's his, for those that don't know, that's his FreeBSD username is trouble@freebsd.org.
Sorry, inside joke there.
Here comes trouble.
Hey, good stuff. Okay. Well, excellent. Well, next up, we have more or less a story of typical Unix fossilization from, it looks like, the University of Toronto up in Canada.
Yes, this is Chris Saberman. We've read a couple of his blogs before. He's usually quite entertaining. And so this all started with a Twitter conversation where he says, I know enough about Unix to get along, but you will never convince me the meaningful difference between less and more. And so on. And so he digs into the history of it here. He says, in the beginning, by which I mean V7 Unix, Unix didn't have a pager at all. That was okay. Unix wasn't very visual in those days. Most terminals were actually like a printer that printed out the stuff you were doing as you did it, which is an awful waste of paper, right?
Sure.
But then along came Berkeley and BSD. People at Berkeley were really into CRT terminals, and so BSD Unix gave us things like VI and the first pager program called More, which showed up quite early in FreeBSD, although that's not as early as VI, which appeared in 2BSD. Calling a pager More is a little bit odd, but it's the Unix type of name, and from the it originally came from the fact that when you ran it, at the bottom of your screen, it would say -- more -- to let you know that, press a button and you'll get the next screen full.
And go. Yeah.
But of course, all of the Unix vendors based their work on BSD Unix, like Sun and DEC and so on. And so they naturally shipped versions of More along with the rest of the BSD programs. Then there were, More was not the best pager ever. And eventually Mark Noodleman wrote Less. With the name actually being somewhat of a joke.
Sure.
When Less was distributed via Usenet, eventually everybody was using it because it was better. And then eventually the BSD More gained the major feature people wanted, which was being able to page backwards, to go back up.
Sure.
Whereas with the old Less, it would just throw away the buffer, and so you couldn't go back. And so, in 4.3 BSD, More itself picked up the page backward feature, but by then, Less had even more features. In a sane world, Unix vendors would have replaced their version of More with the clearly superior Less, or at least updated to the slightly better, newer More in 4.3 BSD. But they didn't.
Of course.
So,
well, you said sane world.
Yes.
That's a qualifier.
Eventually, the BSD version of More became the single Unix specification standard. And so more people adopted that, but Less still had more features and was still growing more. So this entire history has led to a series of vaguely absurd outcomes, like Solaris still using the original More, although carefully updated to meet the requirements of the single Unix specification. So they're still basically using the 3BSD version with some tweaks to make it compliant, rather than actually even just using like the 4.3 BSD version. Let alone something modern that's not 20 or 30 years old. And so,
if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what
Solaris would never dream of changing what More is, not even if the replacement is better. That might disturb someone. And he goes on. He says, oddly, FreeBSD has done the more sensible thing. They've outright replaced More with Less. That is, that user bin More is the same binary as Less. It's actually a hard link. And if you look up the man page for More, it's just the Less man page. OpenBSD has done the same thing, but they actually still have a specific man page for More instead of just giving you the Less man page. On Linux, More is part of the util-linux package, but its man page tells you More is a filter for paging through text one screenful at a time. This version is especially primitive. Users should realize that Less provides more emulation plus extensive enhancements. So they have a package that will provide you a really old version of More if you really want to. And then, given the comments in the man page, it appears that this version of More is directly derived from the source code of the original BSD version, and so on. So then his closing comment is the one that sold it for me. So now you see why I say that Less is more, or both, at several levels. Less is certainly more than More, and sometimes Less literally is more, or rather More is less, to put it the right way around.
Oh, man, that's a mouthful.
Yep.
I always wondered the historical reasons why that was, but yeah.
Yeah, well, because the one that gets you is that Windows, like DOS, had more, but not less.
I'm just a little confused. OpenBSD, so you have a separate man page for More instead of the Less man page, but what's the difference if it's the same binary?
Well, I think it tells you what it just says Less more. Less has an emulation for More. So when you start up Less, it looks what name it was launched as, and if it's More, it acts differently. It tries to
sets the default.
Dumb it down while still giving you some of the features you might want.
Wow.
Yeah.
Craziness. Okay, well, good stuff. Thanks, Alan. Okay, we got a lot of beastie bits to get to, so we're going to kind of rapid fire these at you. So pay attention, listen up close. Okay, so first up, we have a Computer World UK has done kind of a roundup of the top 8 best alternatives to Windows 10, and PCBSD got a mention there. That's kind of cool. Of course, now they have to redo it with TrueOS, but that's fine. I won't fault them for that. They were doing a 10.3, it looks like. What number do we come in again? I should probably look at the article and see.
I think it looks like 4.
Number 4. All right, 4. Okay, that's not bad. Not bad. Well, good. Well, glad to see that they recommended us. And, of course, we'll look forward to seeing TrueOS take that place down the road. Okay, so next up we have creating a quick DNS server with a Raspberry Pi 2 and FreeBSD 11.0 RC1, which I think the next RC is coming out soon. I think I saw an email about that just yesterday morning. It looks like Warner Losh has posted this over Blogspot.
On his blog there.
Very cool. Anything you want to add on that one?
No. It's interesting to see using the Raspberry Pi as a DNS server.
Good stuff. Okay, next up we have a dual boot OpenBSD plus Linux plus UEFI, and that's over at BSDLaptopsWordPress.com, talking specifically how you can make that all happen. Looks like on a Sony Vaio Pro, specifically part 2 is where that ended up. So if you have one of those as well, you might want to check out the first entry. Next up, we have a desktop BSD 2.0. Various versions are now available. So it looks like they've rolled some specific versions with the GNOME desktop, Lumina desktop, KDE, and LXDE. So you can kind of pick your flavor ahead of time.
And there's a GNOME version as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, it looks like FreeBSD gets a new ZFS feature.
2 of them,
or a couple new, including compressed ARC.
Yes, so George Wilson's compressed ARC feature has landed. So what that means is before this, you had your data was compressed on disk, and you'd like with LZ4, right? And you read it, and then you would decompress it, and then it would go in the cache. And then if you needed it again, there it was in the cache. Good to go. This new feature, what it does is when you read the compressed block, it puts the compressed version in the cache, and then you decompress it, and you have the original file, and you use it. Then, if you need it again, you have to decompress it again. But since LZ4 decompresses at gigabytes per second per core, even on a laptop, it means that it's basically not going to slow you down. But yeah,
you get
so
more cache.
For example, an SVN checkout of the FreeBSD ports tree or whatever compresses at like 2 point something to 1. That means it takes half as much RAM to have it all in the cache now. For development for databases, this is epic. With a depending on your database, you can get somewhere between like 1.5 and 3x compression. All of a sudden, your database you have 3 times more cache. That'll make a difference in your life. It does have a small sub cache, 128 megabytes by default, for decompressed versions of blocks, so that if you're reading the same block out of the cache like many times a second, you don't want to be decompressing it every single time. So it will keep a small number of decompressed blocks around, but in general, the idea is to keep everything that's if it was compressed on disk, keep it compressed. So that makes it different than a lot of other things you've seen like ZRAM or so on, where it's trying to, we're running low on memory, let's take up some memory to run a compressor to compress that stuff. This is just, it was already compressed on disk, why let's keep it compressed in RAM.
Why do the work twice?
Let's keep it compressed in RAM, because then we'll get more cache. And the second one is the new allocation throttle. This was presented at BSDCon, but it basically means that before, when ZFS had a bunch of work that needed to be written out to the disks, it would divide that work up between the disks and give it all to them, and it was done when the slowest disk finished. Now what it does is it gives each disk a little bit of work, and then the first person to finish gets the next bit of work. And it just keeps working to keep everybody busy until all the work's done. So meaning the slower disk's going to get less of the work, and the faster disk will get more. Until, because of fragmentation and so on, or just fullness, the faster disk will eventually get slower. Until, even though it's more full, eventually the other disk will be faster, and it'll eventually balance out.
They'll all even out, yeah.
But this also helps solve the problem of, I've added a bunch of new disks to the end of my Z pool, and they have a lot less data on them. And I don't want to write all the new data only to those, because then my read speed is down because I'm reading from fewer spindles. And I don't want to only write an even fraction to it, because otherwise these disks will be full and these ones will be empty. And so it kind of balances it out. These commits are only 10 days old, so they are not in stable 11 yet, and they won't be included in 11.0. But they will probably be included in 11.1.
Which means we'll have them in TrueOS this week.
They're 10 days old. They're to be in the next roll of TrueOS.
Yeah, they'll be in the next push that we do probably this weekend or early next week.
It'd be really interesting to see how big of a difference compressed arc makes for some people. Depending on what your workload is. Like at Scale Engine, for our databases, this will be awesome. For our giant file storage servers that are full of movies that are uncompressible, this will make absolutely...
Not so much.
Well, it might help with metadata. I don't remember if...
Well, I'm just thinking my laptop, I have a lot of Git repos.
Yeah, that'll save...
Keeping more of those in the
exactly.
cache
It'll definitely speed that up. Also, I don't think metadata was compressed in RAM before, even though it is on disk. So it could actually just mean that, even just the savings from metadata could be big. Crawling all those directories and stuff, being able to keep that much more metadata while still staying under the 1/4 of my cache for metadata could make a big difference for performance.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Okay, well, let's move on here. So we have a... that's what I'm like. Sorry. We have a one floppy NetBSD distribution, which... okay.
I didn't know that we could still get a BSD down to fit on a floppy. Like,
who's
I remember like FreeBSD in the year 2000 required 2 floppy disks. One had the bootloader and stuff, and the second one actually had the kernel.
Yeah.
Well, apparently the Japanese NetBSD user group really...
Somebody's got a floppy drive still.
And they've managed to squish down a NetBSD such that it fits. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Stuff. Okay. Well, next up, something we've been talking about for a while. Our producer has been doing a compilation of all the BSD users groups, all the bugs. And we have a link to that in the show notes here. It looks like organized by, I guess, region would be the best way to put it. So like Southwest USA, Northwest, Midwest, Southeast, so forth and so on, going down to Europe, Asia. And yeah, there's quite a few on here. I'm actually surprised. There's a New Delhi bug, which looks cool. Do you have one on your
No, I really wish I did. Is anybody up here around me in Hamilton, Ontario? I'd love to have something and get to talk to more people, but as far as I know, there's nothing around here at all. There's like one in Toronto, but it's like an hour away.
So I know our Knox bug, we have a meeting coming up here soon. I think not this week. I think another week from now. I'm checking the website here real quick.
And I know
the 27th, we have the ZFS talk we didn't get last time is taking place. So
I know there was I just saw an email recently about the one in Chicago having a permanent date and location now. The Triangle BSD user group, which is in I think one of the Carolinas somewhere, is getting set up now. So there's definitely a lot of new bugs set up here. It'd be really nice to have this, sorted out such that it's easy to find a list of actual active bugs. The problem with a lot of lists that you find is that they're really old. What's funny, there's a little thing about, Antarctica, and we can dream, right? But actually, I know some people that are going to be running FreeBSD stuff in Antarctica for research. So we might actually be able to call that a bug.
List it.
Get him on Skype or something and be like, haha.
All you need is a Facebook group or a webpage somewhere. We'll link to it. Good stuff. But anyway, if you have a bug that's not on the list, send it in to us, of course, so that our producer can add it to the list going forward. Okay, well, it's time, before we get into feedback and questions, it's time for the last sponsor this week, which is going to be Tarsnap. Of course, the website for that is tarsnap.com/BSDNow, where you should be, come on, if you're our listener, you probably already know this by now, but I realize we have new people who watch every week, right? Maybe this is your first week and you've not heard this. Well, Tarsnap's pretty much the last word in backups. Yep. It's fully encrypted. Everything is encrypted before it leaves your system. So before it goes out over the wire, and that encryption key never leaves your box, your sweaty little hands. You have it. which means anything backed up to the cloud, nobody has access to that. So you don't have to trust that the cloud provider or the encryption provider, or not the encryption, the backup provider themselves isn't snooping at your data or doing some nefarious things. This isn't Dropbox. Come on, guys. This is the way it should be done. And not only do they make that claim, they back it up by releasing the source code. So if you want to download it, compile it, and run it yourself that way, you can. You can audit it, verify it does exactly what it claims to do. And of course, getting set up is just a matter of creating an account. It's super cheap. So if you're especially backing up data that's not changing a lot, like I do a daily backup of a bunch of files and it's not changing very often. I mean, I think I put $20 in like a year and a half ago, and I'm down to like $16 available.
I did it as my New Year's resolution in 2015. And I'm going to be good into 2025 or something. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. So definitely go get set up today. There's all kinds of packages available for just about every platform under the sun. Examples, you can set up a cron job to kick it off and do your backup every night at 3 a.m. or something. It's real simple. I did that, and I get a nice email showing me what was backed up. So it's good. It's good stuff. So anyway, go there today, tarsnap.com/BSDNow. And if you talk to Colin or anybody over at Tarsnap, let them know that you heard about it here. Okay, so let's move to the feedback and questions. First up this week is Galahad. He says, hello there. I'm pretty new with OpenBSD. I was wondering if you had any tutorials on how to build the X Windows Foundation from scratch for OpenBSD. Let me know.
So that's slightly more complicated because OpenBSD actually maintains their own fork of Xorg called Xenokara, which they've done a bunch of security improvements to, like being able to run it as not root. Although Xorg actually has that upstream now, a very different implementation. But, so for OpenBSD, that's slightly more complicated because they have their own version. I don't know if the regular X one works. I imagine it probably would.
Probably not. I don't know. If you want the easy button, I would just go hit up their FAQ. It looks like FAQ 11 specifically has the whole introduction to X, how to get it set up and bootstrapped. If you really want to compile it yourself, you may have to do a little bit more digging. I'm not sure if there's a tutorial out there to show you how to do that, because the way you can set it up just kind of out of box is so much easier. So I definitely check that out. I mean, just Google OpenBSD Xorg setup and you'll find all kinds of good stuff. All right, anything else you want to add on that one?
That's what I have in mind.
Okay. So next up is Tang. He says, hello, my name is Tang, coming from Hong Kong. I am a FreeBSD user starting from about version 6. I use FreeBSD mainly on my server and personal desktop also. During the couple of years, I feel that FreeBSD is growing a lot, especially from the support ZFS file system. I have to say thank you very much and appreciate all the work you guys are doing. I watch BSDNow video every week. What a great show. I learn a lot. But since English is not my native language, although most people in Hong Kong can speak English, so is it possible that in the future we could add English subtitles to the video?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We'd love to do that. It's just we don't have any ability to do that.
Yeah. Resource-wise, there's two ways to do it, right? Somebody watches and types up the subtitles and attaches them to the video. I don't know if there's any automated way to do
YouTube
that.
has something, but I don't know how it works or how they decide which videos to do it with.
Wonder if we have to set a flag or something on it when we upload, like you can subtitle.
Well, I think Google also decides whether it's worth it or not. I don't know exactly how that works. We would love to have that, and I know we've had some people express interest in doing that, but then they realize how much work it is. And I know somebody's talked about doing like Portuguese subtitles for Brazil, but I don't think that ever went anywhere either.
Okay, well, we'll throw that back out to you guys in the community. If somebody has the desire, drive, motivation, or the know-how to do this easily, or just has the time and they want to do it, let us know, because it would be nice to have, again, but me and Alan personally probably can't do this. I don't think JT has time to do that over what he's doing already anyway, so because that does sound like a separate project, but it would be very helpful. And again, if somebody knows how to do it, let us know.
We try to keep the notes as detailed as we can to make it easy enough to follow along.
Okay. Yes. You want to go ahead and get the next one from
Ivan writes about zpool options. He says, I have two questions about ZFS. First, is it possible to create a zpool mirror with only one device and then add a second device later? So it wouldn't be a mirror when you create it, but yes. So just create it as a regular single disk, non-redundant thing. So zpool create disk, zpool create pool name disk. Then later you can use zpool attach to add a second disk to the first disk, and that converts it into a mirror. So the big this is the mistake people often make is there's attach, which adds a disk to an existing VDEV. So if you add a disk to your existing one disk VDEV, it becomes a mirror, versus zpool add, which adds a new VDEV. So if you zpool add a second disk, you will have a 2-disk, zero redundancy disaster waiting to happen. But if you do zpool attach, you will upgrade your single disk into a mirror and you'll be all good. So yeah, just zpool attach, pool name, original disk, new disk, and it will become a mirror. And it will read silver and it'll be awesome. Yep. This is also, is it safe to use disks of 2 different sizes from different manufacturers? Say one Western Digital 2 terabyte and one Seagate 1.5 terabyte. If you mirror those, you'll only get the 1.5 terabytes of total space. That does work. And then eventually, if you swap out the 1.5 terabyte for a 3 terabyte, it will then grow and be 2 terabytes. And then eventually you swap out the 2 terabyte for a 4, and then it grows to be 3, and you can keep just staggering going up and up. That works. Although, if you have the 2 terabyte disk and try to add the 1.5 as a mirror, that won't work.
Sure. Because it's small.
Yeah. So in that case, if you know that's what you're going to do, then you would say create a partition on the 2 terabyte that's 1.5, and then add the second disk. What you definitely never, ever, ever should do is, create a whole bunch of partitions and try to mangle them together. I've seen people is like, well, I have a 3 terabyte disk and 3 1 terabyte disks, so I'm going to do a bunch of mirror sets and just use that 3 terabyte disk for the second disk on all 3 of the other ones. It's like, no, don't do that.
Oh, don't do that.
No, bad. Anyway. He says, I suppose that it would be logical to first use a smaller disk while creating the zpool. Yes.
Yes.
That, or just create the 1.5 terabyte partition on the Western Digital drive and then mirror it, and then you can always grow the partition after. Anyway, lastly, he says, also, while reading on creating zpool, I read about an A-shift option, which is recommended for performance reasons. So the -O A-shift equals 12 is a Linux-specific thing. It's not part of ZFS, and it's part of the reason why the OpenZFS project was created, to stop them doing things like that. On FreeBSD, there's a sysctl you set. vfs.zfs.min auto A shift that controls that A shift number. Basically, it seems like a magic number, but the default is 9 because 2 to the power of 9 is 512, which is the old-fashioned sector size, and 2 to the power of 12 is 4096, or 4 kilobytes, which is the new default sector size. Most drives are auto-detected properly in FreeBSD now, but maybe not all are, or if you're going to mix drives or know that you're going to upgrade in the future. So yes, you can set the auto A shift to 12, and it will use 4 kilobyte sectors instead of 512.
Cool. Yeah, we forced that on for quite a while, but like you said, the auto detect's gotten pretty good. It's, for the most part, just doing the right thing. Okay, so next up we have Brad, who writes in, hi, Chris and Alan. I'm having a problem with ZFS replication. I figured since it was cross-platform, this was the place to my question. He said, I have a PCBSD desktop, Defiant, and a FreeNAS box, Luna. In my ideal world, I'd be doing ZFS replications from Defiant to Luna, and then from Luna to Defiant. I have the first part of this set up, as I recall, under 10.1. I was doing nightly replication in Luna, and everything was working. I had a Life Preserver, which is our replication tool set up to exclude snapshotting, and then the NFS mounts from Luna, and on Luna, I turned off snapshotting of the sends dataset from Defiant. I'm not sure when it stopped working, but sometime after the 10.3 upgrade, I went to the Life Preserver on Defiant and found no successful replication listed. In the logs, he said, I found after a reboot, all the datasets under the send give me an error, cannot mount dataset, file name too long. I've tried to restart replication on Defiant, but have had no luck. So how do I get replication working again? And what is the file name too long? How do I stop that from happening?
Okay, so the file name too long is just that the mount points in BSD can't be longer than, was it like 40 characters or something, or 63 like characters? That, yeah. So anyway, the directory name is just too long, so just mount them to like set the root directory to like /m or something, so that the mount point name end up shorter, or don't use the whole host name like defiant.mylan.com or whatever. Shorten it as much as you can, and that should solve that problem. The replication should still work in that case. The Life Preserver stuff is that's up to you, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, that's up to me. So that's my stuff. So I guess I would need to see the logs from it. So var log L Preserver, you'll just have some various send and receive logs in there. Send those over to me. You know my email, Brad. I've talked to you before. So send them over to chris@pcbsd.org or chris@ixsystems.com, and I'll take a look and see. Maybe we can figure out what the underlying problem is and get that corrected for you. Okay, so last up we have, let's see, MJ writes in. Said, hey guys, I've been a listener to the show for a while and I want to say a big thank you to all the effort you put in. I really look forward to the new episode each week. Something that's been mentioned a few times on the show is how it's better to use an HBA rather than hardware RAID controller when using ZFS. One thing that's worth mentioning is that a lot of the LSI SAS controllers have IT JBOD only firmware that can be used instead of the IR RAID supporting firmware. It's easy to swap between the two, although it involves flashing, but switching to the IT firmware removes the requirement to use workarounds like creating a RAID 0 for each disk before handing it over to ZFS. He says, for example, here's a link to instructions on how to flash it. He said, keep up with the great work. Here's to another 150 episodes. Yes. Well, we appreciate that. That actually will come in handy maybe for some people.
I've done that on a couple. Obviously, if you're buying the parts specifically, getting the HBA is cheaper, so just do that. But yeah, if you've
inherited
the motherboard on one of my servers came with one built-in one, and then I have a second one that's a card. Depending on which version of the LSI tools, FreeBSD has a built-in tool that allows you to flash it from inside FreeBSD, which is really nice. All the ones that use the MPS or MPR driver, you can just do MPS flash, I think is the command. And I did it recently because I helped test the tool when it was created for Baptiste because I had some of these controllers. But most of mine are the 9207 rather than the 9211 that they were talking about in that particular post. But you can just make sure you get the IT firmware instead of the IR firmware and flash it on there and reboot, and it's all good.
Okay, well, great. Well, hopefully that helps out. Anybody who has any of those, thanks, MJ, for the link. We appreciate it. Okay, so as we wrap up the show here, of course, it's been another fun week, but we want to remind you, send everything into feedback@bsdnow.tv. So that includes, questions, comments, if you have show ideas, topics, something you found we should discuss. If you find a story, I like links. Send me links. That's good stuff. Or even Twitter, send us Twitter links you found. Somebody posted, hey, here's something cool we're working on. Send it all into feedback@bsdnow.tv so we can throw that in the hopper and it'll get churned up and eventually turn up in a future episode. And of course, don't freak out if you send an email in, you don't get a response right away. A lot of times we sit on those so we can answer them on the air. So be patient, watch the next couple episodes, and usually it'll end up in there. Although we have quite a backlog now. I think
we can always burn that up.
Through and yeah, we're gonna have to burn some of those up here soon. But we got quite a few emails that have come in, so we're getting to them. I apologize if it's taking a while. Anyway, stay tuned for next week, though. You'll have to stick around. We'll be still have an episode, even though Alan's going to be at EuroBSDCon. So don't freak out. We're not going to mess up our streak and miss a week. But we'll look forward to speaking to you same time then.